Hello, it's Martin from RC Bits. Today we're going to start on bag B of the SCX10 Honcho, and that really covers steps 10 to 13 in the manual, which is the building of the drive shafts and the shocks. Okay, got all the parts laid out that we're going to need for these steps, and bag B. Let's open bag B and get going with constructing the drive shafts. For step 10, the two drive shafts need to be assembled, and both of them are very similar. You can see here that they're telescopic, and you'll need to just line up the two parts once assembled. The bit I'm going to focus on is this universal joint here and getting inside this plastic part. A handy tip for this section and for building the shocks is just to get a set of your pliers and just wrap some electrical tape around the ends. That'll just protect the parts from any potential damage. Okay, so if we look at this end, I'm not sure if you better see this, there are some small recesses in the ends where these pins need to sit. I find the easiest way to do this is just pop your finger in on the end, offer up that first pin, and then just push so that the metal part locks underneath there. Okay, now we've gotten this far, with the pliers you can now push that and you'll see that it'll drop inside that recess. I would then just pinch the plastic gently just to make sure that that is then firm. That'll then complete one of the drive shafts with the universal joints at either end. Okay. Stage 11 is to build the shock bodies, so I've got one laid out in front that's complete, and we'll make one now on camera. So first thing to do is just install this collar on the main body. Just wind on a couple of turns. This will allow you to adjust the ride height and the springs. Then you need to assemble the shaft. There's two clips that go on here, and then just pinch with the pliers, and you'll know that it's home because it'll spin freely. Now add the washer, and the final clip. That one you can rest on the top. You'll find it's groove a bit simpler, and just pinch that tight. And again, it'll spin freely. And the clips on, you'll have an even gap around. Now you want to assemble the bottom of the main body, which has got a series of O-rings and washers. And generally this is where shocks will leak on an RC. Great way of solving this is to use some of our green grease, some shock grease. What you got to do is pop a small amount on the O-rings, rub it in with your fingers, drop them in the top, followed by the washer, and again a little dab of our grease. Make sure the O-ring's completely covered, drop that in the top, and then pop your end cap on. You'll be amazed what a difference the small amount of grease will make. If you need to get it, you can go on to our website, www.rc-bits.com, and they're available on there. It's a good idea now when you put the shaft in, just to put a small amount of this grease on the shaft. That'll just stop the threads wearing the O-rings when you insert it. Okay, push that through. What we'll do now is just clean off with some towel the end, so that the eyelet doesn't spin freely when we fit it. On the rubber boot. For your eyelet, use your protective pliers. You want to spin on maybe about 10 turns at this stage because we want to get all the shock lengths equal once we fill them. And then just insert small end into the eyelet. There you have it. I'll go ahead and make the other two and come back and show you filling them with shock oil. just a couple of things I'd like to point out before we go ahead and fill the shocks. These 4 steps that we're carrying out now, you'll see in each of them there's a number in a box just here. That says how many of the items you need to make. So in this process of filling the shocks, it'll only show 1 shock, but you will need to make 4 of them. And that's the same for each part in this section. The other thing just to note is in here there's a warning to make sure that when we fit this O-ring, which I will show you, is actually seated correctly. Please be aware that this measurement here for the shock of 72.5 millimeters must be an error in the manual, because when it's made up they're more like 102.5 millimeters. Step 12 that shows filling the shocks, it shows you filling them with oil first. I would actually put together the top caps. The ones that I've chosen to use, because you'll see that on the parts tree there is also another top cap. I've chosen the ones that have got the fake reservoirs on. So if we just put one of these together, easiest way to do it is pop your screw on your hex, push that through the reservoir and then screw that on. This will stop you stripping the thread when installing. This is very easy to do because it's a tight fit, the reservoir. And you see it will just close up, and don't go too tight. Okay, we've got to pop the O-rings in these now. It is just worth checking that the top caps do fit on each of the shocks, that there's no swarf on the top edge, that edge is nice and clean. As we did with the bottom, I'd advise just popping a bit of shock O-ring grease on these O-rings. That'll just help seal the top. Just offer that inside. And actually the easiest way to get that to seat is to wind it on the top of the shock before they're filled. Go gently, you don't want to screw it up too much, otherwise you'll distort the O-ring. You should then see that it's seated all the way around. Okay, I'll go ahead and do those off camera and come back to put the oil in. The axle kit's very good, comes with a nice sized bottle of 30 weight oil. So what we need to do is just fill the shock up with the oil, gradually move the piston to expel any air that's inside, then I just let them sit, and if you just get an ordinary clothes peg, they'll go around the shock body and then you can just stand them to one side. Okay, let's go ahead and fill this one up. You don't want to fill it completely, you just want to be about 1/8 of an inch off the top. And now we need to move the piston to get the air out. I'll try and show you watching the air bubbles come out. I filled all the shocks and got rid of the air on the first time. Now I just need to go back through and again just move the shaft to remove the last of the air. You may find that the oil level's dropped because of the air coming out, and you may just need to top that up slightly. You don't want the piston to come out of the oil, otherwise you'll end up adding air rather than taking it out. I'm just going to go through, check all of these, haven't got air in, and then we'll come back, fill them up and pop the top caps on. See you in a minute. To show you finally filling the shocks, what you need to do, just remove it from the clamp we've had them in, check that the piston is fully extended, top the oil level right up, so it's just brimming. And the advice in the manual is to use a rag, just wipe the top of that shock off, just remove some of the oil, and keeping it upright, screw the top cap on, and again remember not to do it too tight because you don't want to distort that O-ring that's in there. And your shock will operate. Okay, I'll do the other two and then show you installing the springs. Now that all the shocks are built, it is just worth checking that you've got the same amount of oil in each of them, and a good way to do that is just use some calipers and just measure them from end to end. If you don't have a set of calipers, if you just cut out a piece of cardboard the right length, you can then just keep popping each shock in the same. If you do need to adjust, easy thing to do is just wind this eyelet in or out to get them all the same length. Okay, installing the springs, what we need to do, you'll see they've got dual rate springs on the axle kit, and they're all colour coded. So you can see the small one in this case is red, and the large one is then green. In the manual you'll see all the different options. The red one that we're using is super soft, and it's a sort of preload spring, and the green one is then their medium, so you can play with different springs. Okay, so just pop the first smaller spring on, then the little collar that joins the two springs, and the larger of the spring. Now what I need to do is pull those down. You'll see there's an open end in here. Push that on, and then the spring will sit on there. You also do need to install one of these small sections in the end, like that. Okay, we have all the parts that we've put together in steps 10 to 13. Just a couple of bits I'd like to mention. Just to remind you that on the parts tree for the shocks, you'll see there is another top cap without the reservoir on. You can use either, but don't be concerned that you're still left with one. And also with drive shafts, there are these two parts, which I guess must have been used in a previous kit. And again, you won't need those, so don't be worried if you're left with those. With the shocks, you may have heard on the previous section, there was a squelching sound in one of the shocks. I actually took that apart and found out that I hadn't got all the air out. So that's quite a good tip, that if you hear a squelching sound when you're building them, there's still some air in there. I think just to note, if the springs are loose, like on here, you'll see they come off their seat. You just need to wind this collar to take up the slack in those springs. The only thing to caution is that the gap that you create here, you'd want that to be the same on each of the shocks to maintain the same ride height. Okay, the next bag is bag C, and that's really about building the links for the suspension, and then to bring together the first two videos of the axles, the drive shafts, the shocks, and then obviously the links we're going to make together. And then just the first stage of building the transmission housing. So see you in the next video.